It started with a whisper in the wind, a rustle in the alley behind an abandoned warehouse on the edge of a forgotten town. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over cracked pavement and broken glass. And there, amid the cold and the silence, was a mother, a dog, skin stretched tight over bone, her eyes hollow, her breath shallow. She was starving. But even then, as the last light faded and her strength nearly failed her, she nudged a scrap of stale bread toward the tiny whimpers huddled beside her. 5 puppies, barely more than a week old, blind, fragile, innocent. And she hadn't eaten in days. How do you tell a story like this? How do you put into words the kind of love that defies instinct, that refuses to die, even when the body is ready to give up? This isn't just a story about rescue. It's about sacrifice, survival, and a mother's unbreakable bond. The first person to spot her was Jamie, a young woman who worked at a nearby mechanic's garage. She wasn't out looking for animals that day. She was just taking the trash out behind the shop. But something in the way the shadows moved made her stop. She froze. A soft whimper reached her ears. Then another. She stepped closer, heart pounding, eyes scanning the darkness. And then she saw her. Curled into herself, ribs showing through her patchy fur, was the mother. Her head was resting on her paws, barely lifting when Jamie approached. The puppies were nursing, their tiny mouths suckling what little milk her exhausted body could give. Jamie knelt slowly, tears already rising in her eyes. "Oh, baby, what happened to you?" The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch. She only blinked slowly, as if to say, "Asterisk, just help them. Don't worry about me, asterisk." Jamie ran back inside and returned with what little food she could find, a half-eaten sandwich, some leftover chicken, and a bottle of water. The mother looked at the food, then turned back to her puppies. She wouldn't eat until they were asleep. That moment broke Jamie's heart. She pulled out her phone and called the only rescue she knew would come without hesitation, Amber's Paws of Grace Sanctuary. By the time Amber arrived, night had fallen completely. She moved quickly, carrying blankets, a crate, and fresh dog food. She, too, knelt before the mother. "She's in shock," Amber said softly. "But she's still holding on." Barely. Amber and Jamie worked together, gently lifting the puppies first, wrapping them in a warm towel. The mother whimpered when the first pup was taken, then tried to stand. Her legs gave out. Amber placed a soft hand on her. "Easy, girl. They're safe. I promise." They had to carry her. Even with food in front of her now, she only sniffed it. Then again nudged it toward the closest pup. "She's dying," Jamie whispered. Amber shook her head. "No, she just hasn't been shown hope yet. But she still believes in love. That's why she shared her food. That's why she's still here." They named her Grace. It felt right. The first night at the sanctuary was critical. Grace was put on fluids, antibiotics, and carefully monitored. She was too weak to stand, too weak to bark. But when her puppies were brought into the kennel beside her, her eyes lit up. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just watched them, making sure they were safe. Amber slept on the floor that night, right beside her. In the middle of the night, around 3:12 a.m., Grace lifted her head. For the first time in days, she slowly reached forward and licked Amber's hand. Amber stirred, waking instantly. "You're still with me," she whispered. The next morning, Grace ate her first full meal. And that's when the real fight began. To be continued. Grace's first meal was slow, cautious, like a soldier stepping through a minefield. Every bite seemed to ask, "Is this real?" But her eyes never left her puppies. Even as food finally touched her stomach, her focus remained on them. Amber watched quietly from across the room, not wanting to interrupt. She knew what that look meant. It was more than hunger. It was guilt. A mother unsure if she had done enough, if she could do enough, if she deserved this second chance. Over the next few days, Grace began to change. Not dramatically, not like in the stories where the rescue is instant and magical, but subtly, quietly. Her eyes grew a little clearer, her breathing steadier. Her tail, once limp and lifeless, gave the faintest wag on the 4th morning when Amber entered her room. "Good morning, Mama," Amber whispered. Grace's ears perked up. Her body was still weak, but her spirit? It was clawing its way back. The puppies were doing well. Their tiny bellies were full, and they slept curled against each other like a patch of warm sunshine. Amber had seen litters before, but never one so deeply bonded to their mother. Never one so dependent on her emotional presence. Even when bottle-fed, They cried unless they could hear Grace's breathing. And so, the sanctuary rearranged everything. They moved her to a larger, sunlit enclosure. One with space to move, real grass underfoot, and blankets where her pups could nestle. Each small milestone felt like a victory. Grace stood on her own by day 7. She walked 5 paces by day 10. She barked a soft, hoarse sound on day 12. Every step forward made the volunteers cry. Not because she was getting stronger, but because she never stopped looking back at her pups with every step, making sure they were still okay. One afternoon, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain slammed against the windows, and thunder cracked overhead. Most dogs at the sanctuary whimpered or hid. But not Grace. She stood over her puppies, her thin body tense, eyes locked on the door. Amber entered to check on them and stopped, watching in awe. She thinks it's happening again, Amber said to herself. Grace thought she was back in that alley. Back in the cold. Alone. Exposed. Amber sat down and whispered gently, "You're not out there anymore, sweetheart. You're safe. They're safe. This is your home now." Slowly, Grace's body relaxed. She settled beside her puppies and closed her eyes. That night, Amber added one final note to the sanctuary log. Grace is no longer just surviving. She's beginning to live. Weeks passed. The puppies began to walk, tumble, and play. They climbed over Grace's back like a jungle gym, nipping her ears, tumbling in her tail. And she let them. With endless patience, she watched and nudged and kissed their foreheads. When they wandered too far, she gave a low bark, and they came running back. Jamie visited often. She brought toys, treats, and sat for hours talking to Grace like she was family. "You saved them," she told her once, stroking her head. "But you saved me too. I didn't know I could feel this much again." Grace leaned in, resting her muzzle on Jamie's knee. The sanctuary began preparing the pups for adoption. They were strong now, healthy, curious, and full of energy. Applications came pouring in from across the state. Amber was careful, vetting every request. These weren't just dogs. They were Grace's legacy. But one question lingered over every conversation. What about Grace? Most people wanted the puppies. Few wanted the mother. She was older, slower, scarred. But she was the heart of the story. And Amber refused to separate them unless it was right. Then, one morning, everything changed. A letter arrived. Not an email. A letter. Handwritten. It was from a family who had seen Grace's story online. A husband, a wife, and their 10-year-old daughter named Lily. They didn't want just one puppy. They wanted them all, including Grace. "We believe in keeping families together," the letter read. She protected them with her life. Now it's our turn to protect her. Amber cried as she read it. She showed it to Jamie, who broke into a smile so wide it hurt. And Grace? She looked at them, eyes calm, tail wagging gently, as if she already knew. To be continued. The day of the adoption was warm, bright, and full of nervous energy. Volunteers bustled around the sanctuary preparing Grace and her 5 pups for the journey ahead. It felt like both an ending and a beginning. Grace was freshly bathed, her fur now thicker, her ribs no longer showing. A light spark danced in her eyes. She walked with pride beside her children, no longer a starving shadow in an alley, but a survivor. A protector. A mother who never gave up. When the family arrived, Lily ran ahead of her parents. She dropped to her knees and held out her arms as the puppies bounded toward her. She giggled as they clambered into her lap, licking her face, wriggling in pure joy. Grace followed, slower, cautious. Lily's mother knelt down and held out her hand. "Hi, Grace," she whispered. "We're your family now." Grace looked up at Amber one last time, as if asking for permission. Amber nodded, barely holding back tears. "Go on, girl. This is your home now." Grace stepped forward and placed her head in the woman's lap. That was it. She had chosen them, too. The ride home was quiet and full of soft puppy snores. Grace sat beside Lily in the back seat, occasionally licking the girl's hand as if to say, "Thank you for seeing me." Weeks turned into months. Grace thrived. She had a backyard full of sunlight and shade, a warm bed inside, and her children always close. Her days were filled with belly rubs, treats, and watching over Lily like a guardian angel with paws. And the pups? They grew strong, playful, and loved. They had names now: Max, Bella, Luna, Scout, and Tiny. But they still listened to Grace's soft barks like they were ancient commands passed down through love. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Lily sat beside Grace on the porch. "Do you think they remember being cold?" she asked softly. Grace looked at her, eyes deep and kind. I think, Lily's mom replied from the doorway, they remember love more than pain. Because that's what she gave them, even when she had nothing. Lily nodded, resting her head against Grace. And in that still moment, nothing else mattered. Moral of the story asterisk. Grace's story reminds us that the strongest love often comes from the most broken places. Even when she had nothing, no food, no shelter, no strength, she still gave everything she had to protect her children. In a world that sometimes forgets the voiceless, her courage speaks louder than words. Her selflessness, her endurance, and her capacity to love without condition is the kind of story we all need to hear. Sometimes the ones who need saving the most are the ones who end up saving us. Because love, real love, isn't about having more to give. It's about giving even when you have nothing left. And Grace? She gave everything. The end.